The rain was coming down so hard it felt like knives slicing against my skin. My clothes clung to me, heavy and cold, as the storm poured without mercy. I stood there in the middle of the empty road, water soaking through my shoes, shivering while lightning split the sky above. My sister had driven off, leaving me stranded on purpose. Her cruel smile burned into my memory as the car's red taillights disappeared into the dark. She thought she was teaching me a lesson, showing me who had control, reminding me that in her eyes I was nothing but a burden. I had begged her not to leave me. I had asked for just a little compassion, a little warmth. But she wanted to break me, to humiliate me. She locked the doors, rolled down the window just enough to laugh in my face, and then stepped on the gas. Her laughter echoed louder than the thunder. I wrapped my arms around myself, not sure if I was shivering from the cold or from the betrayal. The street was silent except for the rain hammering the asphalt. I felt invisible, abandoned, and for a moment, I thought maybe she had finally won. But then, just as I sank into despair, a sound cut through the storm, the low rumble of an engine, steady and powerful. Headlights appeared from the distance, growing brighter, closer. My heart raced. This wasn't her coming back. This was someone else. When the car stopped beside me and the door swung open, I saw the last person my sister ever expected to show up. My comrade, the one she had always underestimated, the one who never forgot loyalty. That night, the storm didn't just drench me. It revealed who truly stood by my side. The rain came down in sheets that night. Not soft, not gentle, but harsh and unforgiving, as though the sky itself wanted to punish the earth. Each drop hit my skin like ice, and the storm was so loud it drowned out the beating of my heart. I stood there on the side of the lonely country road, shivering, my clothes plastered against me like a second skin, my shoes filled with water until every step squelched. The wind howled around me, tearing at my hair and pushing the rain sideways so that I couldn't find shelter, not even by turning my back to it. My sister's car was already gone, swallowed by the darkness, the faint red glow of her taillights having disappeared moments ago. And with them went any hope of her coming back for me. She had left me there on purpose. That was the part that stung the most. She wanted me to suffer. I could still hear her laughter in my ears, ringing cruelly over the storm. Just minutes before, I had been sitting in the passenger seat, wet from the drizzle we'd already driven through, asking her if we could just go home. She had slowed down, pulled to the side of the road, and for a moment I thought maybe she was listening. Maybe she was going to take pity on me. But when she leaned over, unlocked the door and said, "Get out," I knew she was playing one of her twisted games again. Begged her. I told her I wasn't prepared, that it was dangerous, that we were too far from the house to walk. She only smirked, her eyes glinting with that familiar mix of amusement and superiority, and said, "You need to toughen up. Consider this a lesson." And before I could say another word, she shoved me, literally pushed me, until I stumbled out into the mud and rain. The door slammed shut in my face, the lock clicked, and her laughter followed me as the tires spun against the wet road. I tried to chase after her at first, running a few steps into the darkness, but the car picked up speed quickly, splashing water up behind it and leaving me in silence. My breath came in ragged gasps, my hair dripping into my eyes, and I stood there in disbelief. She had really done it. She had really abandoned me in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't the first time she had been cruel, but this felt different. This wasn't just a harsh word or a mocking insult at home. This was dangerous. The storm was worsening, the lightning coming closer, striking somewhere in the fields nearby, the thunder shaking the ground under my feet. My stomach knotted with fear. And yet, somewhere deep inside, anger burned hotter. I started walking because standing still only made the cold worse. The road stretched endlessly ahead, two pale lines reflecting in the rain, winding into the distance where everything blurred into darkness. There were no houses nearby, no lights, no sign of life except the wild fields and the storm. My shoes slipped against the wet asphalt, and my hands were shaking so badly I had to stuff them under my arms for warmth. The rain soaked through every layer until it felt like I was carrying the weight of the water on my back. My mind replayed her smirk over and over. My sister loved control. She loved proving she was stronger than me, smarter than me, better than me in every way. And leaving me here was just her way of saying I was weak, that I would never survive without her. But what she didn't know was how much her betrayal cut deeper than the rain or the cold ever could. We were supposed to be family. We were supposed to look out for each other. I thought about the times I had defended her when no one else would. When she lied to our parents about failing an exam. When she made mistakes and I covered for her. When she broke rules and I took the blame. I had always been the one to stand by her. And now she had left me like I was nothing. The rain washed down my face, and I couldn't tell if it was only the storm or if tears had joined it. The road stretched on, and my legs ached from the cold. I tried to count my steps, tried to keep my mind occupied with something other than the misery clawing at me. 100, 200, 300. I lost track somewhere after that because my teeth were chattering too hard. My vision blurred from the rain, and I almost tripped on a branch that had blown into the road. The storm wasn't easing up. If anything, it was growing stronger, like it was testing me too, seeing how long before I would give up. I thought about turning off the road into the fields, maybe finding a tree for shelter, but the thought of lightning striking made me freeze. No, the road was my only chance. If I kept walking, I had to reach something eventually. Maybe another car would come. Maybe someone would help me. But as the minutes dragged into what felt like hours, hope faded. Nobody was out in weather like this. Nobody except me, because my sister decided to prove a point. I don't know how long I walked, my body numb, my mind drifting in and out of panic. Every few steps I imagined her face, laughing, smug, and I clenched my fists even though my fingers felt stiff and useless. I whispered to myself to stay awake, to keep moving. The storm couldn't last forever. But then another voice whispered back. What if it did? What if I collapsed here, soaked and frozen, and she never even cared enough to notice? The thought twisted in my chest, but before despair could swallow me whole, a sound broke through the rain. At first I thought it was just thunder, but no, the low, steady rumble of an engine. My heart leapt. I turned, squinting through the sheets of rain, and there they were. Headlights cutting through the darkness, growing brighter, closer, slicing the storm apart like a beacon. Relief washed over me, but caution quickly followed. What if it was a stranger? What if it was someone worse than my sister? I hesitated, torn between stepping into the middle of the road and hiding in the shadows. But I was too weak to run, too desperate to care. I stumbled forward, waving my arms, my voice hoarse as I shouted, though the storm likely drowned it out. The car slowed. The headlights blinded me, forcing me to shield my eyes with a trembling hand. The tires hissed against the wet road as it came to a stop just a few feet away. My chest heaved, my heart hammering, and when the window rolled down, the sight froze me where I stood. It wasn't my sister. It wasn't a stranger either. It was him. My comrade, the one who had fought beside me through struggles I thought no one else remembered. His face was serious, unreadable, but his eyes held something my sisters never did. Recognition, loyalty, and a quiet strength. He didn't ask me what I was doing out here. He didn't mock me for being soaked, for shivering, for looking like a wreck. He simply leaned over, unlocked the door and said, "Get in." And just like that, the storm outside still raged. But for the first time that night, I wasn't alone when I pulled the car door shut. The slam sounded louder than the thunder. For a moment, I just sat there, dripping onto the seat, unable to believe what had just happened. The warmth inside the vehicle hit me like a wave, almost painful against my frozen skin. My comrade didn't speak right away. He just reached across, switched the heater on high, and kept his eyes on the road ahead as if nothing about this situation needed an explanation. That was one of the things I had always admired about him. He never asked unnecessary questions, never demanded more than someone was willing to give. He simply acted. I pressed my hands against the vents, trying to soak up the heat, though it felt like my bones would never thaw. My clothes clung to me, dripping puddles onto the floor, but he didn't complain. I glanced sideways at him, his profile outlined by the dashboard light. His jaw was tight. His eyes narrowed in concentration. He looked the same as always, calm, steady, unshaken by chaos. That steadiness had been my anchor before, and now, sitting there soaked and humiliated, it felt like salvation. "You're freezing," he finally said, his voice low but firm. "I'll be fine," I whispered, though my teeth chattered and betrayed me. Without another word, he pulled the jacket from his shoulders with one hand and draped it across me. It was warm, heavy, and smelled faintly of leather and smoke, a scent I recognized instantly. I wanted to argue to tell him to keep it, but the truth was, I needed it more than I wanted to admit. I hugged it closer and shut my eyes for a moment, the tears that I had been holding back threatening to break free. We drove in silence for a long time, the storm pounding against the windshield, the wipers squealing back and forth in a desperate rhythm. Each gust of wind rocked the car slightly, but inside I finally felt safe. My mind, however, refused to stay quiet. I kept seeing my sister's face, that cruel smirk as she left me behind. It burned into my memory like a scar. "She left you, didn't she?" he said suddenly, not looking at me, but his tone leaving no room for denial. My throat tightened. I wanted to deny it, to make up some excuse, but what was the point? He knew me too well. "Yes," I muttered finally, the word tasting bitter. "She said I needed to learn a lesson." His hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a second I thought he might snap it in two. He didn't speak, but the anger radiating from him was enough to fill the car. That silence was louder than shouting. "I didn't think she would actually." I trailed off, my voice breaking. "I didn't think she'd leave me in the storm." He turned to glance at me then, just for a heartbeat, but his eyes said everything. Disbelief, anger, and something deeper. Pity maybe, but not the condescending kind. It was the kind that came from someone who cared too much to hide it. "She's done things before," I admitted softly, staring down at the jacket I clutched. "Cruel things. But this was different. She wanted me to break." He said nothing, but his jaw clenched so tightly I could see the muscle twitch. Then he shook his head slightly, returning his eyes to the road. "You're not broken," he said finally, his tone steady, absolute. "You're here. That's what matters." The words hit me harder than I expected. Not broken. I had never realized how badly I needed to hear that until now. We drove on, the storm slowly beginning to fade, the thunder moving farther away, the rain easing into a steady drizzle. I leaned back against the seat, exhaustion weighing on me, but my mind wouldn't rest. Memories of my sister flooded back. Childhood moments when I thought she cared, times when I trusted her only to be betrayed again. It was a pattern, one I had ignored for too long because I wanted to believe family meant loyalty. But family without loyalty was just a chain that kept me tied to pain. My comrade seemed to sense my thoughts even though I said nothing. He had always been like that, as if he could read the unspoken words hanging in the air. "You don't have to explain," he said quietly. "I know what kind of person she is." I turned to him, startled. "You do?" He gave a small nod. "I've watched. The way she talks to you. The way she looks at you. Like you're less. I've seen it." Shame burned in me, hotter than the heater blasting across my face. I hated that it was obvious, that others had noticed what I tried so hard to hide. But at the same time there was relief. Relief that someone else understood, that I wasn't imagining it, that my pain wasn't invisible. The road curved, and fields stretched out on either side, glistening from the storm. The sky was still dark, but ahead, a faint line of light was breaking through the clouds, pale and hesitant, like the first sign of dawn. I clutched his jacket tighter around me and whispered, "Thank you for stopping. For being here." He glanced at me again, his expression softening, though his voice stayed steady. "I told you before. Loyalty isn't something I forget." Those words echoed in my chest long after he spoke them. Loyalty. Something my sister had never given me. Something I had longed for without even realizing it. And now, sitting there beside him, I felt it, real, solid, unshakable. We didn't head home right away. He drove to a small roadside diner, one of those places with flickering neon lights that looked like it belonged in another decade. It was nearly empty, the kind of place nobody would notice us in. He parked close to the entrance, cut the engine, and finally turned to face me fully. "You need to warm up properly. And eat." I wanted to argue, to say I didn't want to be seen like this, dripping wet, hair a mess, eyes swollen from holding back tears. But when I opened my mouth, no words came. He was right. My body was shaking too hard. My stomach knotted with hunger I hadn't even noticed until now. So I just nodded, too tired to resist. Inside, the diner smelled of coffee and fried food. The waitress gave us a curious glance but didn't ask questions. We slid into a booth in the corner, and my comrade ordered for both of us without hesitation. Hot coffee and soup. When the steaming bowls arrived, I wrapped my hands around the mug first, letting the heat seep into me. My fingers tingled as they came back to life, and for the first time all night, I felt human again. We ate in silence at first, the clinking of spoons and the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the space between us. Then he spoke, his tone measured. "She thinks she's stronger than you. That's why she does these things. But strength isn't leaving someone in the rain. Strength is enduring it." I swallowed hard, his words striking deeper than he probably realized. "I don't feel strong," I admitted. "You don't have to feel it," he replied. "You just have to live it." And you did. I looked at him then, really looked, and saw not just the comrade who had always stood beside me in difficult times, but the person who believed in me when no one else did. In that moment, I realized something important. My sister may have left me in the storm, but she hadn't won. She wanted to teach me a lesson, and maybe she did. But it wasn't the one she expected. She taught me who I could trust, and who I couldn't. As dawn slowly pushed back the night outside the diner window, I made a silent promise to myself. I would no longer beg for my sister's approval. I would no longer let her cruelty define me. Because I wasn't alone anymore. I had someone by my side who understood the meaning of loyalty, someone who had proved it when it mattered most. And as my comrade lifted his cup in a quiet toast, I lifted mine too, the warmth spreading through me. Not just from the coffee, but from something stronger, something that no storm could ever wash away. When we finally left the diner, the storm had passed. The air outside was sharp and cold, carrying the clean smell of wet earth and asphalt, but compared to the chaos earlier that night, it felt almost peaceful. The clouds had begun to break apart, allowing thin streaks of dawn to shine through, staining the horizon in faint orange and pink. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, hugging my comrade's jacket tighter around me, breathing in the new air like I hadn't in years. The world looked different, calmer, safer. But inside me, the storm wasn't over. My sister's laughter still echoed in my head. Her betrayal still gnawed at my chest like an old wound that refused to heal. He unlocked the car, and I slid back into the passenger seat, reluctant to let the warmth and safety of the diner go but knowing we couldn't stay there forever. As we drove away, silence filled the space again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that allowed me to think, to piece together the mess of my emotions. I watched the wet fields roll past the window, droplets still sliding down the glass, and for the first time since she left me in the rain, I wasn't thinking about survival. I was thinking about what came next. "She won't stop," I said suddenly, my voice breaking through the stillness. It wasn't a question. It was a truth I felt deep in my bones. "This isn't the last time." He glanced at me, then back to the road, his expression unreadable. "No," he agreed quietly. "It isn't." The honesty stung, but I preferred it to false comfort. At least he respected me enough not to lie. I turned to face him, my voice steadier this time. "Then what do I do? Keep letting her treat me like this? Keep being the one who bends until I break?" His grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly, though his tone remained calm. "You don't bend anymore." The words sank into me like a seed planted deep. Don't bend. I had spent my whole life folding myself smaller, trying to fit into the space my sister allowed me, shrinking so she could feel taller. Every time she pushed, I told myself it was easier to give in than fight back. and maybe that was true once. But now I realized every time I bent, I gave her permission to push harder. The storm had taught me something she never intended to, that I couldn't survive like that anymore. We reached the edge of town as the sun climbed higher, scattering golden light across the wet rooftops. The streets were still empty, most people still asleep, unaware of the storm's fury hours earlier. He parked outside his small house, the one he had built with his own hands years ago. It was modest, sturdy, and more welcoming than any place I'd known in years. He didn't ask if I wanted to stay. He just unlocked the door, motioned me inside, and I followed without hesitation. The warmth of his home wrapped around me instantly. It smelled faintly of wood and old books, with the comforting quiet of a place untouched by cruelty. He handed me a towel and a set of dry clothes. Simple, a little too big, but clean and soft. I changed in the small bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. My reflection startled me. My hair hung in messy strands, my eyes swollen, skin pale. But beneath the exhaustion there was something else. Spark. Maybe it was anger. Maybe it was determination. Whatever it was, it hadn't been there before the storm. When I stepped out, he was already in the kitchen, boiling water. He set a mug of tea in front of me without a word, then sat across the table, his eyes steady on mine. I sipped the tea, letting the warmth spread through me, and for a moment neither of us spoke. The silence was thick with unspoken truths. Finally I set the mug down and said, "I can't keep pretending she cares. I've been clinging to this idea of family because it's all I've known. But she's not my family. Not in the way that matters." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Blood doesn't make family. Loyalty does." I nodded slowly, the truth of his words striking hard. "Then what do I do now?" "You stand," he said simply. "You stop letting her decide who you are." I wanted to believe it was that easy, but fear still gripped me. My sister wasn't just cruel, she was clever. She knew how to twist things, how to make me doubt myself, how to make others side with her. She had always been the shining one, the one people admired, while I lived in her shadow. The thought of confronting her felt like walking back into the storm without shelter. He seemed to read my hesitation. "You don't have to do it alone," he said firmly. The certainty in his voice caught me off guard. For so long I had felt like I was fighting invisible battles on my own, battles no one else could see. And now, here he was, not just willing to stand with me, but determined to. My chest tightened with something I hadn't felt in years, hope. The hours passed quietly, the sun rising higher, drying the streets outside. But my thoughts were restless. Every memory of my sister replayed like scenes in a cruel theater. The time she mocked me in front of others, the time she twisted my kindness into weakness, the time she made sure I never forgot my place beneath her. The storm had been her latest play, but it wouldn't be her last. If I didn't change something, she would keep finding ways to prove her power, and one day I might not survive it. By afternoon, I stood at the window, staring out at the world beyond his house, my decision beginning to take shape. I couldn't erase my sister from my life overnight, but I could stop letting her dictate it. I could stop chasing her approval like a starving child chasing scraps. For the first time, I thought about living on my own terms, no longer tethered to her cruelty. My comrade joined me at the window, his presence solid beside me. "You're thinking of her," he said, not as a question but as a statement. "I'm thinking of the storm," I replied softly, "and how she thought it would break me." He nodded, his gaze steady on the horizon. "Then let it be the storm that remade you instead." The words struck deep, more powerful than anything my sister had ever said in her life. The storm had nearly destroyed me, but it had also revealed something I hadn't seen before. My own strength. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to let that strength rise. As evening approached, I realized something else. My sister didn't know I had survived with help. She didn't know my comrade had been the one to pull me from the darkness. To her, I was still out there somewhere, cold and broken, waiting to crawl back. The thought of her shock when she discovered the truth sent a flicker of satisfaction through me. For once, she wouldn't be the one in control. That night, as I lay on the couch in his living room, wrapped in blankets that smelled faintly of cedar, I made a vow. I would face her. Not as the little sibling she mocked, not as the shadow she dismissed, but as someone stronger, someone who had endured her cruelty and refused to bend anymore. I didn't know how or when, but I knew the day would come. And when it did, she would learn that the storm she left me in had not drowned me. It had forged me. The next morning felt different. The sky was clear, the air crisp, and for the first time in a long while, I woke without the heaviness of despair pressing down on me. Sunlight streamed through the curtains in soft golden lines, and though my body still ached from the storm, my spirit was sharper, steadier. I sat up slowly, wrapped in the blanket my comrade had given me, and let the warmth of the room remind me that I had survived. But survival was no longer enough. If I didn't face my sister soon, she would believe she had won, that her cruelty had broken me down into nothing. The thought churned in my chest, equal parts anger and determination. My comrade was already awake, sitting at the small table with a mug of coffee in his hand. He glanced up as I walked in, his eyes calm but observant. He didn't ask how I slept. He didn't need to. He could read me too easily. Instead, he slid a plate of bread and eggs toward me, wordless as always, but the gesture said everything. I sat down and ate, the food settling my stomach, grounding me. After a few minutes, I finally spoke, my voice low but certain. I need to see her. He didn't react with surprise. If anything, he seemed to have been waiting for those words. He set his mug down and leaned back, studying me. "You're sure?" He nodded. "If I don't, she'll keep doing this. She'll keep thinking I'll bend." His eyes lingered on mine for a moment. Then he gave a single nod. "Then we'll go together." Relief surged through me. I had expected him to argue, to tell me I wasn't ready, but instead, he gave me exactly what I needed. Support without hesitation. That was what loyalty looked like, and it gave me the courage to face what I had been avoiding all my life. By midday, we were driving again, the familiar roads pulling us closer to the house where my sister lived. My stomach twisted the nearer we got. Memories swarmed me like bees. Her sharp words, her mocking laughter, the way she always seemed to enjoy my discomfort. But alongside those memories was the fresh strength the storm had carved into me. I clutched it tightly, refusing to let fear take over. When we pulled up outside the house, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Her car was in the driveway, gleaming in the sunlight as though mocking me. I took a deep breath, my hands trembling slightly, but my comrade's steady presence beside me kept me from faltering. Together we walked up the path, each step heavier than the last. The door swung open before I even knocked. My sister stood there, surprised to see me, but the shock quickly melted into her usual smirk. "Well, look who decided to crawl back," she drawled, her voice dripping with amusement. "I was starting to wonder if the storm swallowed you whole." Her words stung, but I didn't flinch. For the first time, I met her eyes without lowering mine. "I didn't crawl," I said firmly. "I walked back. And I'm not here for your approval anymore." Her smirk faltered for a second, but she recovered quickly, crossing her arms. "Oh, please. Don't try to act tough. You should be thanking me. If it weren't for me, you'd never learn how weak you really are." The anger inside me flared, but I kept my voice steady. "No. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have learned how strong I really am." That made her blink. She hadn't expected defiance, not from me. Her gaze shifted briefly to my comrade standing silently at my side, his presence commanding even without a word. Her smirk returned, though weaker this time. "So what? You brought backup. Couldn't face me on your own." "I'm not alone," I said simply. "And that's the difference between us. You think strength is about leaving people behind. But real strength is about standing with the ones who never abandon you." For the first time I saw a crack in her confidence. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her smirk faltering again. The silence stretched, thick and tense, until finally she scoffed. "You've always been dramatic. You think one storm makes you a hero." "No," I said, stepping closer, my voice calm but unyielding. "The storm didn't make me a hero. Showed me who you really are. And it showed me who I am without you." Her eyes narrowed, but I didn't stop. Years of pain, of humiliation, of being pushed down came rushing to the surface, and for once, I let the words flow instead of swallowing them. "All my life I tried to make you proud. I covered for your lies, I defended you when no one else would. I carried your burdens because I thought that's what family does. But family doesn't leave someone in the rain to die. Family doesn't laugh at their pain. You've spent years trying to break me, but all you've done is teach me that I don't need you to stand." Her face hardened, her mask slipping into something colder, sharper. "You think you're better than me now?" I shook my head. "No, I don't need to be better than you. I just need to be free of you." For a long moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the trees outside. My sister stared at me, her expression unreadable, but I could see the fury burning in her eyes. She wasn't used to this version of me. She wasn't used to me refusing to bend. And it unsettled her more than anything I could have said. My comrade stepped forward then, his voice steady and low. "You underestimated the storm. You thought it would break them. But it didn't. And from now on, if you try again, you'll answer to me." The weight in his voice silenced her completely. She glanced at him, then back at me, and for the first time I saw doubt flicker in her eyes. She tried to mask it with another scoff, but it was weaker now, hollow. "Fine," she snapped finally. "Go play strong somewhere else. I don't care." But I knew she did. Her voice trembled just enough to betray her. And for once, I didn't feel the need to win, to prove anything more. I had already won by standing tall, by refusing to let her words cut me anymore. I turned without another word, walking back toward the car, my comrade at my side. The sun was higher now, the day bright and clear, and as we stepped into the light, I felt something I hadn't in years: freedom. Not just from the storm, but from the chains my sister had wrapped around me all my life. As we drove away, I looked out the window at the fading image of the house. My heart was still pounding, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from victory. She had wanted me to break, but instead she had forged me into someone stronger. And as I leaned back in the seat, the road stretching ahead like a promise, I knew one thing with certainty. I would never bend to her again. The days after I confronted my sister felt strange, almost unreal. For so long, my life had revolved around her shadow, dodging her anger, enduring her cruelty, measuring myself by her approval or disapproval. But now the silence was different. It wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't a silence that suffocated me. It was a silence that gave me space to breathe. I woke up each morning without the knot of dread in my stomach, and as small as that seemed, it was a freedom I hadn't known I craved so deeply. At first, I half expected her to come storming back into my life, to call me with venom in her voice or show up at my door to throw another insult like a knife. But days passed, then a week, and nothing came. The phone stayed quiet. The world stayed still. That's when it began to sink in. She had no more power over me. Not unless I gave it to her. For the first time, she was the one left in silence, not me. My comrade stayed by my side through it all. He didn't speak much about what had happened with my sister, but his presence was steady, like an anchor in waters that still threatened to pull me under if I thought too hard about the past. We took long walks down roads that stretched far from the house, where the fields rolled wide and the air smelled of grass instead of rain. Sometimes we didn't speak at all. Other times he'd tell me small stories about battles fought, about comrades lost and remembered, about resilience that sounded so familiar it almost felt like he was telling my story back to me in another form. One afternoon we stopped by a lake just outside town. The water was still, reflecting the sky in a way that made it seem endless. I sat on the shore, pulling my knees to my chest, and watched the sunlight dance across the ripples. "Do you think people can really change?" I asked, my voice quiet. He didn't answer right away. He skipped a stone across the surface, watching it bounce 3 times before sinking. "People can change," he said finally, "but only if they want to. Some choose to stay the same, no matter how much the world shifts around them." I knew who he was talking about without him saying it. My sister had built her world out of control and cruelty, and I had spent years trapped inside it. But I had stepped out and she had chosen to stay. That was the difference between us now. The more time passed, the more I began to rebuild myself, piece by piece. It was in the small things at first. Cooking meals without feeling like I had to rush before someone criticized me. Sleeping through the night without replaying old arguments in my head. Smiling, really smiling, without worrying if it made me look weak. These small victories built into something larger, something sturdier, until one morning I looked in the mirror and realized I didn't see someone broken anymore. I saw someone alive. One evening about a month later there was a knock at the door. My heart stuttered, thinking for one terrible second that it might be her. But when I opened it, I found my neighbor, an older woman with kind eyes, holding a basket of bread she had baked. "I thought you might like this," she said a little shyly. "I know it's been a hard season for you." The gesture caught me off guard. I hadn't realized people had noticed my struggle. Hadn't realized they cared. I accepted the basket with trembling hands and whispered a thank you. That night, as I tore a piece of the warm bread and shared it with my comrade, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, belonging. Slowly, I began to open myself back up to the world. I joined the community gatherings I had once avoided, spoke to people I had once kept at arm's length out of fear of judgment. To my surprise, they welcomed me, not with pity, but with warmth. It was as though stepping out from my sister's shadow had revealed a light I didn't know I carried, one that drew people in instead of driving them away. But the true test came when I saw my sister again. It wasn't planned. I was in town, picking up supplies, when I spotted her across the street. She looked the same, sharp, confident, her posture screaming superiority. But there was something in her eyes, something restless, like she was searching for something she couldn't find. She noticed me too. For a moment we just stood there, the world around us bustling as if we were invisible. Her lips curled into a smirk, the familiar mask she always wore. But this time it didn't cut me. Didn't even reach me. Felt nothing. I nodded once, calm and steady, then turned away and walked on. No words, no confrontation. She no longer had any place in my life, and I didn't need to prove anything to her anymore. That was the moment I knew I was free. Not because I had defeated her, but because she no longer defined me. That night, I told my comrade what had happened. He listened quietly, then gave a rare smile, small but genuine. "You faced her without even lifting a hand," he said. "That's strength most people never find." And I realized he was right. I had spent years thinking strength meant enduring her cruelty, proving myself against her endless challenges. But true strength was walking away and still standing tall. True strength was building a life she couldn't touch. Seasons shifted, and as time moved on, so did I. The rainstorms came and went, but they no longer frightened me. I no longer saw them as punishment, but as reminders of the night everything changed, the night I chose to rise instead of crumble. When the thunder rolled, I didn't flinch. I listened, steady and unafraid. One evening, standing outside as the rain began to fall, I let it wash over me. The drops slid down my face, cool and cleansing, and I closed my eyes. This time, there was no bitterness in the storm, no cruelty. Only renewal. Only freedom. I thought of my sister, of the lessons her cruelty had carved into me. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt gratitude, not for her but for myself. Gratitude that I had endured, that I had found the strength to walk away, that I had discovered who I truly was beneath all the hurt. When I opened my eyes, my comrade was standing at the door, watching me with that calm gaze of his. He didn't need to say anything. He knew. I smiled at him, wide and unbroken, and walked back inside. The storm raged on outside, but inside I was calm, strong, free. And that was the ending I had been searching for all along. Sparkles, if you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Bell subscribe to Twisted Fate Chronicle for more powerful and unforgettable story twists.